Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton, here with Brandon. First show of 2021. Couple of housekeeping notes, couple of announcements. We kind of teased this over the last couple of weeks, but we are going to replace our normal open play Thursdays with something new. These are the Thursdays that follow Clock Talks. It's not the gameplay for the decks that we profile. We're still going to be doing that. But Brandon,
we're going to be doing something called 5 cards, 5 minutes. 5 cards from either the upcoming set or a set that's just come out. So we're going to look at 5 cards from Fate Grand Order, and within 5 minutes, talk about them and kind of highlight why we think these are 5 noteworthy cards. This week we're going to look at our double R to R rarities, and then after the set comes out on that next Clock Talk Thursday, we're going to look at some of the lesser rarities, and again, 5 noteworthy cards from Fate Grand Order.
I think we both agree that this is going to be a more useful thing for people. It will give not an overview of a set as much, but it'll give an idea of what a set does and some of the more interesting pieces in it. Not only at the highest levels, not only the cards that, the chase cards, the ones you would expect to be good, but also the kind of under the radar pieces that will fill those other slots and make the deck function.
Absolutely. And these cards, we look at them based on kind of the cards themselves versus them in the decks that we build. So we're able to pull out, look at different cards that may not fit in the decks that we like to play or like to build, but are still noteworthy cards and are noteworthy for the set.
The trend has been that Brandon usually will build something out of whatever the new set is and profile it on the channel. That only gives us the opportunity to really look at up to half of the set. Ideally we're looking at, probably the best level 1, best level 3 combos if we can, but there are still a lot of different engines that can be used to make these decks work that we don't get the chance to really talk about. So this will hopefully give us the opportunity to talk more about everything a set has to offer instead of focusing on what we think the primary deck from that set will be. We'll still be doing a lot of that.
So yeah, that's kind of one of the new things that we're looking at starting as early as this Thursday. We also wanted to highlight something that's going to be coming to the channel soon, looking ahead towards the release of Heaven's Feel 2. Looking at the fact that Fate, the main series Fate, has 5 different sets that you can play into to build a deck, we wanted to look at all of the pieces within those 5 sets to help get us ready for Heaven's Feel 2 release. So we wanted to take a unique approach at looking at the set this time around. With talking with our tournament organizer, he really came up with this idea that we should try to reenact the Holy Grail War leading into the Heaven's Feel 2 release. And we loved that. We thought that was fantastic. And so we're actually going to try to highlight different Grail War pairings. For example, like Shiro Saber, like Ilya Berserker, and try to essentially mimic the Holy Grail War with Weiss. Because we have access to all of these sets, we have access to so many cards and such a great card pool that we thought we could potentially find enough unique sets to mimic the Grail War.
So functionally what this looks like is we are currently in the process of building 8 different decks based on the different sets of characters found in the original Fate Stay Night storyline. And we're going to face them all off against each other in a grand tournament style that will allow us to show off what the set can do outside of the main core. You're still going to get the main core, the main decks that you would expect to see, the Shiro Saber, the Marine Archer, the Sakura Rider, Ilya Berserker. All of those are going to be present, as well as all of the other interesting decks that Fate has to offer. Basically all thrown into one kind of tournament. It's not necessarily meant to be like a competitive, like us versus each other kind of thing, but it's meant to be a showcase of all of the different ways that Fate can be played, and maybe a couple of different decks that, don't get enough attention.
One thing worthy to note, though, with these decks, we're going to try to keep true to the idea of the pairings. They are not waifu decks or one true pair decks. They are decks designed to be able to function and compete.
Right. It's essentially the best possible deck using the different cores that are meant to be played together.
We're really excited for that. I think it's going to be a great time, and I think it's going to be helpful to get us ready for that release.
And for this, we're going to be bringing on a couple of guys to help us out from our locals. Like Brandon mentioned, our tournament organizer, as well as another guy from our locals. Both good players, both excited to jump in and do this with us. So the plan is we will be recording all of these games live with like actual video cameras, not on Untap, not on TTS, in person, and then uploading those games with some commentary over the course of several days, one after the other, leading up to release. The couple of weeks leading up to the Fate Heaven's Feel 2 release, we will have a video every day, not unlike what we did with Invitationals, but definitely smaller scale, where we will have some gameplay, we'll talk about the decks, and hopefully show off what Heaven's Feel 2 brings to the table. So, should be a lot of fun. The plan is to do that in June, assuming that's when Heaven's Feel 2 is released, which is what we anticipate based on the current schedule, although there hasn't been an official release date, which is why we are not announcing a date right now. It should be good. It's going to be one of our biggest 2021 projects here on the Clock Tower, so pretty excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. So housekeeping aside, thank you, all of you who watched and listened and subscribed in 2020. We didn't really know what to expect when we launched this. We had no idea how many people were actually going to care that we were making this channel. So thank you for your attention. We know that your attention is valuable and we're trying to give you something worthwhile. So we do appreciate that. And we hope that 2021 we will be able to make things that you care about. We don't really have much from Bushy Road. That's kind of the headline, I guess, right now. We were anticipating that we would have something from Bushy Road by now to announce about either January, February shop challenges, shop leagues, or potentially even what 2021 Springfest looked like. We don't have anything. There are no announcements for any of that. And honestly, at this point, I think, Brandon, you and I would both be really surprised if we got a trios season in 2021.
Absolutely. The likelihood that we would get trios at this point is still rather slim. And so we're moving forward with the anticipation that there will not be Springfest once again. With that in mind, we do have on the JP side their annual JP announcement next week, which is going to be January 18th for us at midnight in the Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, here on the East Coast, it will be midnight between January 17th and 18th. Everywhere else in the US, it's going to be late night on the 17th. And in Europe, it'll be early morning on the 18th. But yeah, so if you are in Europe, it'll be the 18th. If you're in the United States, it will be late night on the 17th into the early morning hours of the 18th.
With that, we're not anticipating anything directly related to English, other than the potential of new sets into JP, which then correlate to potentially coming to English.
Right, because we do have a few sets that have been announced for JP so far that don't have English release dates. We don't anticipate that to change. We don't anticipate English release dates for those during this stream, but potential new properties in JP that could eventually, late 2021, early 2022, make their way to English. So this is obviously something for the super speculative, far out future at this point, but we're going to learn what is next for JP in about a week. In any case, link to that stream is in the description. So, given that there's so little to talk about, it means that we can engage in the most useless of exercises, which is wild speculation about what happens next. We are playing in one of the weirdest metas imaginable. Not necessarily because the decks and the cards are weird, but because we just don't have anything really to go off of. Aside from a couple of online tournaments last year, there really weren't any major events to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
What are we even looking at going into 2021? Like, because that's assuming that we have competitive events in 2021, right?
Yeah.
Which is also, I think, likely. I think.
It's still an assumption that we're making. Yeah.
Like, but we don't know. There's so much that we're waiting on not just in terms of like Bushiroad making announcements, but like just the world in general. Like the next couple of months are going to tell us a lot about what summer and fall might look like. So there's still so much that we don't know, except what's on the cards.
Under the assumption that we are moving into a regional fall tournament scene, let's kind of look at what kind of trends we're seeing now that may help us understand what that looks like.
Based on what has been released since competition stopped, and what is going to be released in English in the next few months before competition is supposed to resume, we can at least make educated guesses. And I think that the first thing that we're looking at, as far as potential trends for the 2021 meta, is the presence of blink, removal, and level down effects.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of sets have them. Data Live has them in spades. Bofuri's going to have them. Kaguya's going to have them. There is some already in sets that already exist, including Fate. This is going to be a very weird time for decks that like to keep things on field for multiple turns. That's going to be a hard thing to do in 2021.
With that in mind, we're seeing things like hexproof become more and more valuable when building decks. So we're seeing cards with those effects being teched in a little bit more often. Cards that, again, like you mentioned, cards that want to stay on field that have effects lasting beyond that initial turn almost immediately lose value in some way because they're not going to be gaining that secondary value for that effect.
The profile that loses the most value because of all of these effects is the level 1 Oboro, which is going to be really interesting because two of the best decks in the meta play level 1 Oboro combos. The AOT Aaron and the Konosuba Mega Bean. Those are two of the most popular level 1 combos in all of English Weiss right now. It's going to be interesting to see if players try to pivot off of level 1 combos that do this. For those of you that maybe are unfamiliar, an Oboro combo is one where on your opponent's turn, following your combo turn, when your opponent frontal attacks your card, it can bounce back into your hand. That effect is pretty easily removed when you have a blink effect that removes the card to memory and puts it back on stage, because then it takes away the combo effect and then it's just sitting there without the bounce back effect. Or something that levels it down, puts a level 0 on stage instead of that level 1, or potentially just removes it from field entirely. One of your pluses, one of the reasons that you're playing these Oboro combos is because these cards bounce back into your hand. They let you loop the combos, which means that you get to keep consistent field, and just having cards in hand, those are resources. Oftentimes accompanied by something else, like the Astolfo in Apocrypha, for example. Not only does it pop back into your hand, when you get a reverse on your initial turn, you get to look at the top card. If it's a character, add it to your hand. That combo, half of its plussing, comes from that level 1 Astolfo popping back into your hand, and then using that level 1 Astolfo to then meet the early play condition for your level 3 Astolfo. Just for an example. That's not the most popular Oboro, but it's one that desperately needs that Oboro effect in order to gain its advantage. If it loses that, then that whole deck is functionally crippled.
Mm-hmm.
With stuff like Megamine, the advantage is that you're twin driving, so you're getting more triggers. A lot of people are playing a lot of gates in the new Konosuba, so they can trigger the gate, get that level 1 combo, the climax, back into their hand so they can loop the level 1 combo when those Megamines pop back into their hand. They're also running salvage triggers so that whenever you trigger one of those salvages, you can, gain the advantage of going to get something from waiting room because you have more opportunities to trigger. With AOT, the advantage is getting your salvage event, your free salvage event, as well as getting the level 1 combo itself back into hand. So it's not the full advantage for a lot of these combos, but it's a significant advantage for a lot of these combos, especially the Megamine. If you lose the ability to get that level 1 back into your hand and loop your combo, it really hurts these decks a lot. And it's going to be interesting to see if people try to pivot off of these kinds of combos. Whether they try to continue to play the same sets, but with different level 1 combos, or if they move to a different set entirely because these combos just aren't as viable in a meta that counters them hard.
Another profile that gets hit pretty hard with the level down with the bounce effects, neg soul walls.
Yeah.
For example, Priestess on field with -3 soul, all of a sudden bounce to memory and back, that soul's gone. Doesn't matter anymore.
Yep.
And so it makes playing combos like that much more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when the point of playing the deck to neg soul to prevent damage, so that way you can survive longer to win, is immediately negated.
Stuff like that is going to need hexproof going forward. And a lot of these sets don't have hexproof. Or at the very least, they don't have the ability to give hexproof to those front row pieces. Some of them do.
I mean, if we look at Beaufrey has the ability to give hexproof to that neg soul wall.
Right.
But if we're looking at previous sets, like we were talking about here with Goblin Slayer, it makes it much more difficult. If you're looking at things like the Oberos that you were talking about, granting hexproof to level 1s is very uncommon.
Right. And there are some things, however, that do grant hexproof. And I think that, especially in Fate, we're going to see the Takitsubo, the back row saber, that grants hexproof to whatever is in the middle of the front row for that reason. Anything that grants hexproof is going to become a lot more valuable in this meta. Or things like there's the back row Aqua from the new Konosuba set, that when something dies, it sacrifices itself to rest the character that would have otherwise been sent to waiting room. So there are some ways around it, but it's going to take some tinkering, and it's going to take some teching in stuff that specifically overcomes the thing that hard counters what your deck does in order to keep the advantage that you want to generate with that kind of build. Another thing that I think this really hurts is early plays, just in general. I think we're looking at the new anti-change with this. I don't think we're going to see as many anti-change counters. We're going to see a lot more of these removal effects played instead. Because a lot of these early plays, like the Union in Konosuba or the Shizu in Slime, they have hand encore. So those getting leveled down or removed isn't as effective. Those are more subject to level down than removal, because a lot of the removal stuff and the blink stuff applies to stuff that is level 1 or lower, more specifically those combos. But the level down is going to potentially really affect those early plays, and if it doesn't have hand encore, then those early plays can just go away. They can be just removed from the field. So I think things like Love Live Sunshine, which has those early plays, could be affected by this. Anything that plays standby can be affected by this. So we'll see. It'll be interesting, but I think that level down effect in particular is going to really disrupt a lot of stuff that wants to get early plays down. The blink /removal /level down effects those are the ones that are going to affect the meta more than any other new stuff in 2021. That would be my opinion.
No, for sure. And I think one other thing that we're seeing as well is we're seeing a lot more events being played than we have in the past, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Like, we're seeing events
Mhm.
becoming more and more, not necessarily critical to decks, but being able to help provide advantage in ways that were not necessarily available before. Whether it's through different bonds that we've been seeing, because a lot of these new events cards have bonds to them to be able to get them more readily available into
Mhm.
hand. And as we look
Mhm.
into 2021, we still see these events becoming more and more prevalent.
The big reason for that is, like you mentioned, the bonders. I think that's what makes these really playable. And we also have more stuff that's, adding level 1 or higher cards to hand as opposed to characters. So in Konosuba in particular, there are a lot of these things. The Aqua combo does this. The On Death Wiz does this. Adds things that are level 1 or higher, characters or events. So I think that increased access to things like your Foreclosure Stock Swap in Konosuba, the bonds to the swords in Adventure Time, the bonds to the mask event in Slime. Those are the things I think that make those really tick, which is what I think is going to be really interesting to see about Data Live, because it has an event that is really powerful, the My Little Shido event, that doesn't have a bond. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work. That might be the most powerful event that we've ever seen in English Weiss. I would argue that it is. But we don't necessarily have a way to immediately get it into hand. There isn't a bond, a salvage bond, or a search, anything like that to go get this. So it can be added off of certain effects, but not having a direct bond is going to be interesting. Because, like I said, that's a really powerful event. So I think that one of the things that they did maybe try to balance that a little bit was not give it a specific bond. So we'll see how that goes. I'm curious. I still think it's going to be incredibly powerful, but not having a bond kind of differentiates it from what we've been seeing from powerful events in the past year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I think is worth mentioning, this is a trend that's been going on a lot longer than going into 2021, but it's worth mentioning. Everything heals now.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much healing. Almost everything has not just early play healers, but early play pitch 1 stock heal is becoming more and more common, and almost an auto include. We're getting to the point where early play heal isn't an auto include. There's so much of it, and there's so many things that heal that early play heals aren't even necessarily the best thing to put into your deck all the time, because we have things like stock healing. Almost every important level 3 at this point is healing on play, and I think healing oneself to 3-0 and living from 3-0 is going to be a lot more common of a tactic in 2021, because more decks will have access to that kind of healing. I don't know, Brandon, what are your thoughts?
I would definitely say to expect your opponent's decks to be healing at some point, whether it's early play heals, whether it's late game heals at level 3.
Mm-hmm.
Decks now have just healing included. Typically with the end game finisher, it just also happens to heal.
It's one of those things that's just kind of being printed onto almost everything.
Which, I mean, it also isn't a bad thing, because I think it's also putting kind of like a standard of healing as well. There's a certain design to the game that once you reach a certain point, you're kind of also looking to try to stay at a certain point.
It forces decks to close.
Yeah.
It forces players to the 2-turn end game is just not as much of a thing anymore. You have to be able to close, because if you push your opponent to 3-6, suddenly they're down to 3-4 or even 3-3. Or with some decks, there are things that heal even further down than that.
So, kind of looking at the idea that sets typically are going to need a relatively strong finisher to close out the game.
And I would say that if there's one more trend that I think we'll see in 2021, I don't think people are going to be running as many Brainstormers. We have more and more things that can get someone through their deck and also plus them without the chance of whiffing.
Yeah, the access to mill with essentially the ability to trade out cards. Kind of like almost that 1-for-1 exchange, the discard, look at 4, choose 1. That ability to kind of just essentially just trade out for deck speed as well as maintaining hand size.
There's so much selectivity now with combos and other effects that I don't know if the selectivity that the Brainstormer offers isn't as unique as it used to be. It used to be a lot more, and there's still a lot of, top check 4, add 1 kind of things. But most level 1 combos offer either an insane amount of plussing, where you're just getting cards on cards into your hand, or enough selectivity to be able to add from waiting room or search deck. This hasn't rendered the Brainstormer useless necessarily. Like, I'm not saying that the Brainstormer is dead, but its function is less unique now, I think, than it was a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we have enough salvage tools, we have enough search tools, we have enough mill tools. I don't know if pay 1 and hope you hit a climax is as appealing now as it was a year ago, unless it has something else on it. Like the Konosuba Brainstormer, for example, I think it's still going to be run as like a 3 of, because of its soul plus on the salvage trigger when that's played. If you're trying to loop that Megumin Obero combo, which, again, is a whole thing, but if you are trying to loop it, then you want to have that in the backfield, because then you can just keep adding soul every time you slam one of those salvages. There's really great synergy there. The Sakura Brainstormer, really great synergy with Fate.
Mm-hmm. With the 8-bar combo.
I don't know if people are going to be trying to play as many Brainstormers for decks that don't have that specific synergy. Like, I'm not saying that this is definitely going to happen. I could be completely wrong about this. But it seems to me that the Brainstormer is becoming less valuable. It's still a thing, and we're still going to see it played, but I think we might see it more as a 2 of than a 3 of in 2021. I don't know if it's as useful of a profile now as it was a year or two ago.
I think you're onto something. I think that there's quite a bit of mill available. Also, one of the big things is I think that the combos are becoming a little bit stronger, if that makes sense. Like level 1 combo especially.
Yeah.
With that change in the level 1 combos to intentionally try to move your deck forward, you're not needing to rely on the Brainstormer as often.
And this isn't, Magic or Pokemon where a search is a huge, powerful thing because you have limited deck access. In Weiss, you go through your entire deck multiple times a game. It would be weird to not have access to the card that you want eventually. You feel good about your chances with a mill 4 choose 1.
You have the ability to essentially change the cards in hand into the cards you want.
Yeah.
Sometimes just even adding cards is more beneficial than searching out those cards at those moments in time.
I think most players would rather draw 2 than salvage 1. So many effects are adding more cards to hand than they did back when Brainstormers were at their most powerful.
So we're definitely looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing some of those trends continue to take place and keeping an eye on other trends as they begin to appear.
Or not. We could be completely wrong.
Sure.
I feel pretty good about these projections. It'll be fun to come back to this in a year when we do this again for 2022 and go, oh, shoot, that didn't happen.
We'll be able to say, called it.
In any case, let's move on and start talking about the sets specifically that are going to define 2021. And the first set is Date Alive. Date Alive is the best set in 2021. And that's the end of the video. No, for real though, Date Alive is going to be the boogeyman. I've been saying this for months, and I'm legit scared to play into a Date Alive heavy meta. It's really, really good, y'all. It's really good. And it's coming in without a ban list. I'm scared. Date Alive is really good.
It'll be interesting to see.
Like, we've been playing it because Brandon's been working on Date Alive.
Yeah.
Every time we play it, I get more annoyed with it. It's like, oh, it has that too. It's like, it has all of the best effects. There are so many ways you can take this deck, all of which are good. It's an obnoxiously good set, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong about it. I'm hoping that it's not as great as I think it is, but oh man, we might need an English ban list to counter what Data Live might do to the meta.
Being one that plays Data Live,
counter my pessimism a little bit.
There's definitely some still significant weaknesses in the deck, so I don't think that it is as big of a boogeyman as Colton needs to make it out to be. However, I do agree that it is good, and I would argue that it is most likely going to be the best set in the meta for a good period of time in its current form.
We thought AOT was bad. This could be worse.
But I think that there are other sets, they're going to be close.
Fair enough. Let's talk about some of them.
One of those is going to be Fate. I think Fate is going to be a top-tier deck, especially with the addition of Heaven's Field 2 coming out.
I think Fate's going to be our best hope to counter Data Live. Out of the things that I have seen, I think that Fate is the thing that is most likely to keep Data Live in check this season. It's got some really, really powerful top-end stuff. We're still working on what the mid-game looks like. The mid-game is still pretty okay. It's not great. It doesn't generate a ton of advantage, which I think to some extent makes sense just because it already has so many good old pieces. The limited mid-game gives me a little bit of pause in terms of its ability to hang with Data Live in terms of resource development, but it's still really good. No, make no mistake about it. I would say that it's probably poised to be the number 2 deck in 2021 as of this moment, but that's just some speculation. And starting to put some preliminary builds together for English, Fate's going to be real good. Don't know what the ceiling on Fate is yet, but it at least has a really high competitive floor.
Another set that's still going to be relevant and still going to be very powerful, I think, is also going to be Konosuba.
We're going to have to see what happens with the Oboro. We're going to have to see what happens with the level 1 game. There are other level 1s that can be played. There's obviously the old Union package, but it requires a reverse, which doesn't feel good going into a standby heavy meta. There's the Aqua level 1 that's interesting. Or we just play a bunch of things that try to protect that level 1 combo and maybe hope that we don't run into multiple Data Lives at locals or at regionals. You know, a lot of this is going to depend on how it shakes out, right? Like if Data Live is half the meta and they're all playing heavy removal, then okay. But if they're pivoting towards more standby, less removal, then the Oboro is actually going to be just fine because it doesn't require reverses and it can side attack with the Twin Drive and the Soul Plussing Brainstormer. Konosuba's role in the meta will be dependent on what people do with Data Live. I think that's going to determine what people do with Konosuba. It's a good set. It's a really good set. The new Megumin Union endgame combo is one of the best in all of Weiss because it has an insane floor. It has a fantastic floor because of guaranteed clock kick and a little Hef Fumio in there that decompresses enough to help those extra burns stick. Fantastic floor. Closes out a lot of decks from 3-0 really, really consistently, especially with the other pieces that it has at its disposal. I've played a lot of Konosuba recently, as you can tell by looking back at the videos we've been releasing. I'm pretty sure I've released 3 Konosuba deck techs. Links in the description. We'll see what happens. I'm curious to see if the 5-3 holds up, because I think that's the most intriguing build right now is the 5-3, but it's going to depend. You know, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. We'll see what happens, but Konosuba definitely a set that's going to remain high on most people's lists. Let's talk about the old boogeyman for a second. Attack on Titan. Going to be an interesting year for Attack on Titan. It's been really good for years now. It was good again in 2020. 2021 is going to be interesting because it's got an on-reverse Oboro that's been the main engine of its advantage. And if we're playing into a meta that has a lot more standby in it or has removal effects, that combo is going to be a lot less powerful. Brandon, is AOT still good in 2021?
I think AOT is still going to be good. I think AOT is still going to be relevant. I think what we're seeing, especially with things like Data Live, with Fate, with Konosuba, and I think with AOT as well, is we're seeing a lot more gatekeeping decks. Decks that you have to be able to reach this certain level, otherwise it's not going to be competitive. So like you have to be able to at least compete with, for example, AOT has been kind of like the gold standard for a long time. AOT was if your deck can't beat AOT, then it's not going to be relevant. I suspect what we'll see is that the Data Live's going to do a very similar thing. Now, whether
Yeah.
AOT can survive that, I think still remains to be seen. And I think that that's only going to be shown across different avenues, such as tournaments, such as little more than local play, to be able to fully grasp what can truly enter in and what can't. I think
Yeah.
IoT is going to be closer to the edge of that cutoff list than it has in years past.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, it's been on the list for a long time. If you bought AOT when it came out, you have gotten your money's worth for sure.
And then some.
So far, all the decks that we talked about are ones that we think will be good and relevant in 2021. And I would say there's one more for sure that stays on that list, maybe two. But the one that I'm thinking of is Slime. As the channel's resident Slime player, Brandon, Slime in 2021?
I think that Slime's going to run into some of those issues you talked about before, because Slime is really much more of a 2-turn kill. With healing becoming more and more prevalent, it makes that 2-turn kill a lot much more difficult, which pushes Slime down on that tier list, in my opinion. However,
and here it comes.
When Data Live drops in English, Slime 2 drops in Japanese. I fully suspect that that's coming to English. So whatever that looks like, if that can push Slime into that next level, then I would wholeheartedly agree. I think it needs Slime 2 to reach that endpoint. I think that Slime does well, and I think Slime is going to be a gatekeeping deck. I think because what I think is going to happen, I think is especially when we get to that more regional time and you have those Swiss rounds, and you're trying to battle it out in the Swiss rounds. One of the big things you're going to have to keep an eye on is not only consistency of your deck, but you're going to be facing off against a wide variety of decks, right? Because we don't know what people have. We don't know what people are going to bring. We have general ideas on what we think are good and what we think are great, but that doesn't mean that everybody has those decks or has those sets.
Mm-hmm.
So people are going to bring what they have. People are going to bring what they think is good. People are going to bring what they think can potentially win it all. So you're going to be facing against a variety of different things, whether it's 40% Data Live, whether it's 5%. We don't know. Slime doesn't necessarily depend on its opponent's deck to do well. Slime really says, I'm going to do my thing, and I can do my thing better than you.
It's very non-interactive. It's not very matchup dependent. It's memory compression. Like, at the end of the day, it's hard to stick damage into a deck that is 1 out of 3, 1 out of 2.5. It's difficult to win games in that situation, and that's where Slime is going to maintain its position, honestly, is because it can get cancels in any situation. As long as you got your memory compression together, you can get cancels. However, Slime does need to get those level 1s into memory, which removal can affect that, which also in turn affects its ability to get its early plays down. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays in that situation. If it can't get its memory compression together, and if it can't get its early play condition in, it's going to struggle. So that's why I would say that Slime 2 is the reason that it remains on this list. We have no idea what's in Slime 2.
None. We don't even know if it's going to be traded the same. Like, we suspect it will, but
Right.
You never know.
But as long as it has the pieces necessary, probably a different level 1 combo, honestly. Either that or something that grants hexproof, as well as a legitimate finishing combo. Slime 2 could be very, very powerful in an English meta if it were to drop in September or so, which is about when it would probably drop, given that we usually get about a 6-month period between JP and English releases.
If we just follow what we have for the release schedule now, we're through July.
Yeah, we anticipate Kaguya comes out in July. We don't have any English releases beyond that. We anticipate SAO Alicization 2 We anticipate Slime 2. And there isn't really anything else I think that we actually think is a shoo-in to show up in English. Which is why I think next week's JP stream is going to be interesting, because that might tell us what's going to show up at the tail end of 2021, early 2022.
Yeah.
Praying for Dragon Maid. So, okay. The other final deck that I think is still potentially relevant, but I don't know to what extent it's relevant, is going to be ReZero. I don't think Memory Snow gets there. I don't know about Frozen Bonds. What do you think, Brandon? What's your take on it?
I think ReZero with Frozen Bonds is actually going to be pretty strong. I think you're still probably going to be running the book combo at level 1. But I think there's a good possibility you're going to be running the new top end from the new set.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because I think there's enough options there to be dealing consistent damage. Whether you're using the top end for that clock kick or burn 2, I think you're going to be dealing additional damage on top of that attack. So there's also enough synergy with that kind of Puck and Amelia combo that you're going to be able to do quite well. I think especially even if you include a lot of the older stuff as well, like you're looking at the back row Brainstormer that arrests characters. You have a lot of different tools to be able to do what you need to.
You know, there are a couple of combos here at the top end that are pretty good. So we'll see what people end up rolling with. But there's definitely enough here for this to be competitive, I think. We'll see what happens. But I think that ReZero, in my head, kind of rounds out the top tier stuff to me.
There are going to be many that kind of tier it off by different actually letter grades. We're not going to do that mainly because we don't have competitive play to confirm a lot of this.
But looking at the in brief version of what else could potentially be good here, Adventure Time still has a really good top end. So if it gets its level 1 game figured out, it can still swing for a lot of damage. Love Live Sunshine, kind of the same way. Still can swing for a lot of damage. Has the Kanan that keeps its stuff on field, so it's less likely to be as subject to the removal effects. Bovary and Kaguya-sama, both new stuff coming out later this year. We don't really know what their English builds are going to look like, but we know they've got some really strong pieces. A lot of that removal stuff, they're both going to be at least in play and probably really significant. Bang Dream is always going to get new stuff because it's Bang Dream. So you always have to at least be aware of the fact that you're probably going to play into some Bang Dream at some point. So that's going to be, still pretty viable. Just because there's so much of it.
Absolutely.
We're going to get new Madoka stuff here in a little bit. And, there are some Madoka builds running around that are pretty powerful. So we'll see what happens there. I think a lot of the stuff that was kind of on the edge of really competitive is going to kind of drop out of being competitive. I think Sword Art is going to really start to fall off in play. Review Starlight isn't going to see as much play as it used to. I think Fate Apocrypha is really going to struggle insofar as it was getting played at all. I think Cardcaptor's days of being the upstart are kind of over at this point, just because it's going to really be punished by all of these removal effects, and it doesn't really have any way to counter them.
Yeah, it doesn't have cross-turn hexproof. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I think a lot of the stuff that was kind of on the edge of the meta is going to kind of drop out in 2021, which is really a bit of a shame, but it's also to be expected. But anything that is heavily dependent on an on-reverse level 1 combo, or dependent on stuff that needs to stay on field but it doesn't have hexproof, or anything that can't decompress an opponent, anything that doesn't have stock swap Fumio effects, those are the things that are going to really struggle going into this meta, I think. Because it's going to be hard to counter removal, it's going to be hard to get over standby, and it's hard to swing into good compression. And I wouldn't say that compression is going to be like the stronghold of the meta in 2021. Like, I think a lot of stuff that's going to be really good isn't necessarily super compression heavy, but there will be some stuff that does compress really well, and it's going to be hard if you can't decompress an opponent. So almost everything that's really good has some kind of decompression tool on it.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens long term. This is our best guess as to what we think could end up happening.
We've been at this a while, so we're going to end this clock talk here. Looking forward, this Thursday coming up is going to be our first 5 cards, 5 minutes. So we're looking forward to that, and looking forward to putting that out there, getting ready for the release of Grand Order Babylonia.
We're looking at rares and double rares for Grand Order Babylonia. Should be a good time.
Following that is going to be next week, my deck tech, looking at, again, Grand Order.
Grand Order is about to be the best set released in 2021 as soon as it comes out.
Because it's going to be the only set released in 2021.
That's the joke, Brandon. Thanks for explaining the joke, though. I appreciate it. So, like you said, Thursday, 5 cards, 5 minutes, rares and double rares for Fate Grand Order. On Tuesday, Brandon's new deck from Fate Grand Order Babylonia. On the following Thursday, gameplay for Babylonia. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll be back with another Clock Talk, hopefully with some actual news to talk about and not wild, unfettered, uncareful speculation about what 2021 may bring. Because, all of the speculative stuff from a year ago about the year 2020 were accurate. So it's important that we keep this tradition up. In the meantime, thank you for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And have a good one.
We'll see you then.